The chapter title is called From Touched to Empowered, and it goes through my story, my perspective of what happened that left me touched by suicide, and how that connected with my sisters and my mom and every everyone else who started the Teen Suicide Prevention Society. Um, what I did not realize is that when my sister gave her 7-minute talk about her first suicide attempt and all of the attempts that followed, she's still with us, but she still struggles with suicidal thoughts every day. And she wanted to get the tools that she had learned into the hands of teens before they needed them. And this was in, I believe it was August of 2019 when my sister gave that talk. So that's what launched the mission itself. But going through the process of working with the Teen Suicide Prevention Society, I remembered other times where there were other situations with other friends or family members where suicide came across, either as an attempt or they had died. And so that's why I wrote the chapter that I did, because there were all these little touches along the way. And that just led to our family being empowered to do something about it.
Like Dina said, I was a firefighter and EMT for 21 years in Massachusetts. And it was a family tradition thing. I kind of was born and raised in it, along with the military. And I loved the job. I did it from when I was 18 for, again, 21 years after that. So I got in young. It was kind of all I knew. And that, job being what it is, which is full of a lot of trauma, and we see a lot of bad things over and over and over again, gave me quite a bit of images, a lot of good and bad memories, not all bad, but coupled with my childhood and abuse, and then personal loss and trauma throughout the years, in my adult years, I ended up developing complex PTSD. And with that, a few other diagnoses that go along with trauma. And so in 2017, I left the job, which was very hard. And I sort of lost my identity because at 18, I was sort of given it. So I kind of got on this journey of advocating for mental health, specifically in the first responder world, because it's so under talked about, or talked about at all sometimes in some areas. Suicide rates were really high. I lost a few friends. I had my own attempts. I've had 6 suicide attempts in my own life. And I knew something needed to be done. So I started talking about it, started doing social media stuff. Before you knew it, I was speaking around the country and doing podcasts, as far away as Australia. Got involved with some documentaries. And that's kind of what I do these days, is I try to break down the stigma, because it's just such an important topics. I think it's something we all can find a common ground with at some level, whether it's we know someone who suffers from it, or a family member, or ourselves at some degree or some level. So I think the talk about mental health is so important for everyone to hear about.
My chapter is about my life and my early childhood forward into adulthood. I did not grow up in the best family straight from the beginning. And then I got into foster care, which the foster care system's messed up now, of course, but back when I was in it in 1994, 1995, it was worse. And I thought I was safe in the home that I got adopted in, and quickly found out that was not the case. But my life got better as I went out and spread my wings at 19. It was the first time I'd ever truly been away from home and by myself, and basically just had to restart my life at 19.
I just wrote my own personal story based on my life, and my book is being turned into a movie right now. So the chapter is actually based on my life. based on some of the trauma that I went through, but also the mindsets of how trauma and PTSD changes the mind and the way we think and the way it affects our relationships and finances and just everything. It just totally affected my whole life as a man, and now as a father to my 8-year-old daughter. It's really affected me in so many different ways that I look at the world differently, and I look at people differently, and I look at even my schedule and anxiety and everything that I go through every day differently, because now I know the reason why it's happening and why it's happened in the past and how it's affected.
No matter what happens in your life, no matter what you've been through, there's hope. And you're going to be okay. And there's absolutely nothing that can happen to you in this life that you can't get through. And I am a living, testimony to that. I've been through things in my life that I never thought that I would ever be able to get through anything like that. But I'm still here, and I'm still, I'm able to talk about it today. And I'm here today so that I can talk about it and help others and be a light and be a beacon of hope.
The audience. So when you asked me to become part of the collaboration, and I was very quick to say yes. I was very excited. What I did is I really sat down and I started to think about what message do I want to get across to the audience, and how can that message dovetail with all of the other work that I'm doing in the mental health space, and how does that tie into my overall why and my own personal mental health journey. And the one thing that just kept coming back to me was this idea of how I kept hiding in the shadows for the first 33 years of my life and not telling anyone what was happening with my own mental health struggles. And so I started thinking about this idea of why it's so important to speak up and speak out about mental health in general, and also getting other people to know that they're not alone on their journeys. There are people just like them who are out there, who have struggled, who have moved through it. And so I ended up coming up with a title. It's called Tell Someone, and it describes what it feels like when we finally break the cycle of silence by sharing our mental health struggles for the very first time. And so my chapter really starts out with a bit of a backstory of me growing up throughout my adolescent years, my high school years, my college years, and then my early years on Wall Street in New York City, and what it was like for me dealing with severe anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder, and hiding behind a mask or a facade and not sharing that with anyone for a very, very, very long time. And I thought, I want to really bring people into what it feels like to have anxiety and to have OCD, for those who haven't had it or haven't experienced it, to get an idea of what it's like. And for those who do live with it, to hear that, yes, there's somebody else like you out there. And this is my own manifestation of it. And so what I did is I kind of walked through, what the signs and symptoms of my anxiety were like, and what my obsessive compulsive disorder was like, and how I could see that OCD change and morph over time, and how unpredictable and and all the different twists and turns that it would take. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to tie that back with this idea of why it's so important to speak up and tell someone, and not make the same mistake that I made by hiding in the shadows for the first 33 years.
So my chapter is really about myself growing up from the age of 3 and being what they would call a super genius savant. My parents were obviously pretty taken back by the idea, and when I started school, it was pretty difficult for me to communicate with other people. But luckily, my cousins and my friends and the school themselves was a brilliant school, and they allowed me to express myself. While there, obviously, between the ages of 3 and 8, I met a lot of prominent people, both in government and in other areas of entertainment. And that, of course, allowed me to make money. And unfortunately, that caused me to be targeted by people who lived in that area, but who didn't like either the fact that I was coloured, or the fact that I didn't know at the time they were actually involved in what we would call a paedophile ring, human trafficking. It's something I would learn pretty much every year of my life between the ages of 3 and 8, and it would become something that defined my life. To clarify, I mean, even now it is something that through this as a means of communication in regards to trauma, it's something that I don't think you ever truly get over. With my memory loss, it's physically losing so much time with loved ones, with my own children, which is obviously another part of my story, and how those relationships have all been affected by this one criminal aspect, and that has essentially both ruined my life and been, I guess, the very reason for it. Is the things I've always wanted to do is help people, and I believe helping people is something we do through God's love. I've always believed that we can strive to be a better community in every aspect of the word, no matter what nation you're from, no matter what color or sex or gender you are. And so I guess my story is really about overcoming all the hatred and all the evil that you might experience in the world, whether it's from bullying at school to people wondering if you're insane or not because your story's so unbelievably heartbreaking yet overwhelmingly incredible.
Yes, I'm so excited to be part of this project because this theme is something that is kind of misunderstood or not really talked about enough. And honestly, I haven't shared my story with a ton of people, so this chapter for me is really writing about my rock bottom point of my life, that floor of despair that left me ready to follow through with all the dark suicidal thoughts that have been swirling in my head. And in that, I talk about, what happened at the crucial moment where I was ready to end it all. Like I had this cry of desperation to determine, is God really real and does he love me? And then the story kind of unfolds from there, like what that path forward, looks like, because that's the hard part. Walking away from the floor of despair is really the hard part.
So this time I'm writing about really being afraid to do something different or something new, but being afraid and going through that and doing it anyway, because I have often said that I like to live my life without any regrets. In other words, I don't really want to be able to get to a point where I say, I wonder what would have happened if. So if I have an idea or a thought and I feel like my life should go in a different direction than it's going, then I feel the need to pursue that. As much as it scares the mess out of me, I still want to do it. So I'll go for it. So I wanted to kind of illustrate that in this chapter. I talk about what I've done in the past and what I'm planning to do. And really it's around helping my whole career has been about serving others in one way or another. In the meetings and events industry, that's really what I was doing. I was serving my clients by producing their events, going in most cases from concept to execution. But during the pandemic, I felt called to help others who decided to take this journey of entrepreneurship and help them grow their businesses, avoiding some of the mistakes I made growing my own, and I made lots of them. So I want to help other people avoid some of those. And I started doing some of it during the pandemic, and I have to tell you, every time I did something, I did a session, I really just felt like I'd won the lottery. So I feel, I know that this is something that I should be doing. So I am like all over that. However, it is like, oh my God, it's like starting a whole brand new business all over again. And it is scary. Entrepreneurship can be very scary. However, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. So I wanted to kind of go through that exercise in this particular chapter in the hopes that somebody out there, if they're thinking, I want to do this so badly, but I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of what people might say, I'm afraid of that, whatever the fear is, I think it's important to just work through that fear. Be afraid. It's okay to be afraid. It's not okay to not do what your heart is telling you to do. So that's really what it is.
In this chapter, I talk about I've had a relationship that was abusive, and you never think that you're never in your wildest dreams going to live with a narcissist or somebody who's going to be verbally abusive to you. You don't think you're going to put up with that, and I found myself doing it for 6 years. And then I saw that losing a job got me out of that situation, and where academia saved me. And I've had certain people in my life as far as professors who've helped me to see that even in my darkest moments, that you just don't give up, you just keep pushing forward. So that's kind of what the chapter is about. All the little blessings that have happened to make me who I am, and how it all comes together with the pieces of the puzzle that is my life. The very first chapter that I wrote was just after losing one of my tenants to suicide. And being a suicide survivor myself, I found it very, very difficult to come to terms with, oh my gosh, how I'm feeling. Now I'm seeing the other side of it. So I see the transformation of going from, okay, this is where I was, to, okay, the next one, it's a little lighter than the first one, and now I'm into something that is extremely positive, and taking the moments that were shame and actually flipping them around to show that, no matter where you are, how dark and how much darkness you're in, the light at the end of the tunnel is just around the corner to finding your life's purpose.
Now, a time such as this, now it's time for me to be here, because I'm also a cancer overcomer. And I want everyone to know, if they have cancer or any other disease or problem or symptoms of something coming up, they don't have to be alone, because guess who's there? God. He made you, and he wants to have a relationship with you. And if you go to him instead of run from him when something's wrong or you're scared, he will see you through. And that's what happened with me. And when I went through cancer, it was a good time for me. And that sounds weird. A good time. When is there a good time? Because way back whenever I'd hear someone had the C word, as I called it, oh my gosh, how can anybody survive that? I was so fearful of it. And you know, God says, don't fear. 365 times he says, do not fear. But back then, before I had the Lord, like I do now, in a relationship, I was fearful. But after that relationship, just give yourself totally to him and walk with him. It's like when I got the news, I'm sorry to tell you, Marsha, but you have HER2 positive breast cancer. And people would say, oh my gosh, what did you do? What did you say? Did you cry? Nope, because at that time, the hands of God just enveloped me and gave me hope. And so when people would ask me, oh my gosh, how are you doing? I said, I'm fine. I'm not going anywhere. But I really said, I ain't going anywhere. I have one wonderful husband, 5 beautiful kids, and a ministry. I'm not going anywhere. And so that right there was a mental state of mindset of, no, I'm not going anywhere. I have something here to live for. It's not my time. I will be here.
The chapter that I wrote about was, it was intensely personal. Like, there are stories in it that like my kids don't know, most of my family don't know. Honestly, I even called one of my cousins and warned her that I was going to be writing about this because she's a little bit younger than me. And so I wrote about my mom and she's passed away now for, I don't know, over a dozen years. And she has attempted suicide more times than I can count during my lifetime. Mm-hmm. And so I just wrote about that, like what it's like to be a kid of a parent who struggles. And so it was hard. Like, I would have to take breaks and let my brain like do its thing and come back in 3 or 4 days. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just to write one chapter.
When my husband developed COVID, then it was pneumonia he had. He didn't die of that. He died of sepsis. And I didn't know he had sepsis. I didn't know he was that sick. I always thought he was going to be home. And it was kind of a shock to find out that he was so sick and he was unconscious when they called me. And I rushed to the hospital. They weren't going to let me in. Well, God granted me favor. And I did go in to see my husband. And I was there when he passed away. But the miracle that I want to share with everyone today is after my husband passed away, it's almost like my husband had a message to give me. And so that I say the words correctly, I'm going to read it. The picture that was outside my husband's room when he passed away was a beautiful mural of stars and hands with colored hands. And I had my body brace on because I had fractured 3 ribs and I was still wearing that for about a year. But the mural, it said, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars to change the world.
When I was approached about this book, I was like, wow, it's a great idea, because one of the biggest things I am advocating for is mental health. And I've dealt with it for a long period of time, even when I didn't know exactly what it was. And my story kind of primarily focuses on my disability, which is my eye condition. I'm legally blind from a condition called Stevens-Johnson syndrome. And I talk about kind of the ebbs and flows of starting with a disability or just starting as a child and then succumbing to a disability. And then as time going through schooling and the challenges that come with that and just in life, what my disability and how it's affected me, and then how that correlates with the mental health, because most people, I would say, most people in general have some sort of mental health, but disabilities, it's kind of like an added package when you automatically have a disability. And I just wanted to kind of get my voice out there in another type of avenue, in book form, I suppose, just to share, what people with disabilities go through. And I'm just one story, one of many, and even people with the same story as me, or same condition as me, have a different story. But I'd like to just show what it's like to, have very little vision and still be able to kind of navigate through life and make life work for you, because, the world isn't really made for people like me, but we find ways to survive and thrive and do wonderful things with it. And and then just kind of maybe towards the end of the chapters about the podcast and how I got to that, how I've kind of found my voice and why I do what I do, and you know, what kind of motivates me to try to help others and inspire others.
I had good memories writing this. It was comfortable writing this. I thank the Lord that I'm able to write it, because I had a heart attack in 2016. I'm still here to tell the story. And I know a lot of my friends are not. I have a shoebox full of obituaries, and more than I could probably tell you, over 30. You know, we're talking about just since COVID, because that's when they start happening. So I feel really blessed, fortunate to be here, to even write about this, and hopefully talk to some folks about being a foster child and surviving.
My trauma started as a young girl, just trying to find love in all the wrong places, and desperately wanting to be loved and not rejected, and so I felt like I could never be myself, Dina. And so I started trying to be what everybody presumed or wanted me to be. And that was such a great battle. And I had some behavioral issues. I remember my mom taking me back and forth to court because I was incorrigible. And she just couldn't understand it. My mom was the greatest mom. However, there was a great disconnect that I was so looking for in my youth with the relationship with my mother. And here I am 60 years later, and I talk to my mom sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. She lives on the East Coast, I'm on the West Coast, and how God has mended all those broken pieces.
So I wrote this chapter for many reasons. The first reason is because one of the things that we all as individuals, don't have an existence without is love. All right? And most importantly, the importance of love in each and every one of us. Some people will also say that, if you're not self-aware, self-love is a big requirement of that. So as a child, I was deprived of love. If it wasn't for my grandmother and my grandfather, I probably wouldn't be here today. That's the honest truth. So the appreciation of love all through my life has been a very big topic and one of incredible importance